Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this short video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous night of the local time. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And the most important updates are coming from Kharkiv direction. The Russian forces, the Russian military authorities continue sending more and more weapons in direction of Belgorod with additional sign of group of forces north. So the battle for Belgorod, the battle for Kharkiv is going to become very powerful, and it's obviously going to be very hot in this direction. While the Russians are sending additional forces, the Russian airspace forces continue bombing and attacking the Ukrainian positions in this direction. For example, in this video we can see how the Russians managed to discover and destroy the headquarters or command center of 92nd Mechanized Brigade. According to information we have, the Ukrainian soldiers who were captured in the vicinity of Liptsi provided the Russians this information, and after that the Russians made additional reconnaissance operation, and after that they destroyed the headquarters. Now let's move inside of Liptsi itself. We have additional videos. We have few explosions, one of FAB-1500, another explosion of FAB-3000. So let's take a look in this video. Video, as you can see, is a very good quality. For example, the first explosion was the explosion of FAB-1500, and as you can see, the strike was more or less accurate. Another temporary deployment point of armed forces of Ukraine was destroyed. Few seconds later, in the second part of the video, we can see the explosion of FAB-3000 already inside of the central part of Liptsi. So as you can see, the Russians are bombing this territory heavily. If we move a little bit in the southeastern direction, we're going to see another FAB arrival. In this case, the Russians were bombing the temporary positions of the armed forces of Ukraine between the forest and the tree lines. Just a few small FAB-250 or maybe FAB-500, nothing special, just regular activity. A bit further in the eastern direction, closer to Volchansk, we got few more explosions with the use of FAB-500 or FAB-1500. In this case, we see significant, very big explosions. Also, the Russians were bombing the temporary positions of Ukrainians. So these are very important videos, and the most important thing that we can, let's understand from all these videos is that the Russians already see the concentration of Ukrainian forces along the line of combat contact, and that Ukrainians are already ready to begin the greatest Kharkiv counter-offensive operation version 3.0. Furthermore, as for the redeployment map, we got a very interesting report that Ukrainians have redeployed the 17th Tank Brigade in the Liptsi Kharkiv direction, which most likely the Ukrainians are planning to use for breaking through the Russian defense belt. Furthermore, we got additional videos of casualties, of consequences of Russian attacks, FAB strikes inside of Kharkiv. So very big is going to start happening very soon. It's the only question we have, whether the Ukrainians are planning to begin this greatest Ukrainian counter-offensive operation version 3.0 before the summit in the Washington NATO summit or after. As for the situation on the ground, the Russians reported that Ukrainians continue attacks in direction of Gluboka. Most of them were repelled once again, but we need more details. Maybe the Ukrainians managed to improve a bit their positions inside of the village. According to the Russian official sources, all attacks were repelled without any progress from the Ukrainian side. As for Volchansk, the same story. The Russians continue their offensive operation in the southern part of north of Volchansk with the purpose to force the Ukrainians to fall back this territory completely. The Russians reported that they managed to improve their positions. On the other hand, the Russians are stated that Ukrainians continue concentration of the forces between Tikha and Zybina. Currently, we don't know for sure the exact number of Ukrainian forces who are located here. As we discussed, the main purpose of these forces, of this group of forces, is to connect the Ukrainian footholds in the northern Volchansk with the area in the vicinity of Tikha. The Russians see everything, of course, and as soon as they see another concentration of forces, the Russians start using and bombing the territory with FAB. In this video, we can see another FAB arrival on some temporary positions of armed forces of Ukraine inside of the village by the name of Tikha, which also confirms the Ukrainian control over the territory. Now let's move further. Let's move further in the Avdiivka direction. Not Avdiivka, in Donetsk, the area of responsibility of group of forces south in the southern Kupiansk direction. We have a very big activity of Russian forces, Russian aviation between Zarychno and Tarskoye. On this video, for example, we can see a series of aviation strikes in this area, including one important explosion, and that the Russians managed to destroy another pontoon bridge that Ukrainians were using to redeploy their forces from Zarychno to Tarskoye. Also, we have another video of how the Russians were bombing another mortar position of armored forces of Ukraine. Summarizing everything, if we increase the numbers of updates, so since the beginning of June, we see more or less, let's say, active front line in this area. Maybe the Russians do have some plans for this direction before the end of the month. Now let's move in direction of Razdolovka. Today the Russian sources adjusted their maps. Most of the Russian sources, mappers, adjusted their maps, and the Russian sources provided the video of how the Russian stormtroopers were moving through the village of Razdolovka and how the Russians were raising the Russian flag inside of this area. Currently we don't know for sure the exact square kilometers or square meters that the Russians managed to establish control over, but the flag was geolocated here inside between these buildings, so we have adjusted the map a bit. Some mappers, some pro-Russian mappers shows a little bit different situation. Some pro-Russian mappers shows that the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to establish complete control over this territory. So of course we need more details, more information to make the same adjustments on the map, but for now we have adjusted just based on the geolocations and coordinates we received. Now we are moving further. We are going to Tarskoye, Toretsk direction. During the previous night we haven't received anything from this area, so we don't know for sure how exactly the Russians were developing their offensive in this direction during the previous night. As for Western Avdiivka direction, we have additional updates. We have additional map confirmations of Russian progress inside of Novoalexandrovka. As you can see, according to Deep State map, this village was completely captured by the Russians, and most likely in a day or in a two, the Russians, the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation, will provide additional update during the Ministry of Defense report. Also, we got reports from Deep State about additional Russian progress in the village by the name of Sokol. So basically the village was captured as well, and now the main clashes are taking place in the village of Yevgenievka, more precisely among the first buildings and the streets, let's say the eastern edge of the street. Now we are moving further in direction of Krasnogorovka. We got additional updates inside of the village, and now the situation is covered with the fog of war, because the Russians every single day improve their positions more and more. We got more updates, more videos from the Ukrainian side of how they were FPV droning the Russians in this part of Krasnogorovka. Currently it's very difficult to understand where exactly the Russian positions are, and most likely, according to geolocations and according to common development of the situation, we can make a conclusion that this empty area without any, let's say, color is also already Russian control. So the Russians, if we calculate the distance between the edge Russian positions in Krasnogorovka and, let's say, the river itself, there is a river like Lazova, the distance is around 1.230 kilometers. So it's not so much, not so many, and it's obviously will be bypassed by the Russians very fast, very soon and very fast. We got significant details from Ugledar direction. Today pro-Ukrainian mappers also adjusted its maps, including neutral mappers. The Russians during the previous 24 hours, maybe 48 hours, maybe 72 hours, managed to significantly improve their positions between Salotka and Vadiana, and to capture additional strongholds in the territories that used to be under Ukrainian control of the 72nd Mechanized Brigade. So obviously the progress of armed forces of Russian Federation is significant. The Russians are moving further in the western direction, and now the distance starting from Ugledar to Konstantinovka, along the distance between the main supply road and Russian positions is very small. Most likely the Russians will continue moving further in the western direction with the purpose to shorten the line of contact and to reach the northern outskirts of Mykolaiv, and basically to connect the forces between Mykolaiv and Vladimirovka itself, and to force the Ukrainians to fall back in direction of the coal mines. We have also additional updates from Zaporozhye direction. In this area, the Ukrainians start publishing the videos of HIMARS strikes. I'll remind you that according to information we have, the Ukrainians are planning to use this direction, Vasilievka, in direction of Energotar, as a primary target, as a primary direction for during the Ukrainian greatest counteroffensive versions 3.0. And in this video, we can see the concentration of Russian forces. Maybe there were some military exercises or some training, maybe those were FPV drones, and the Ukrainians attacked them with cluster rounds. Later, we got significant number of videos of how the Russians were evacuating the wounded soldiers. During the previous night, the Ukrainians launched another missile strike with ATACMS, and as a result of that strike, the Ukrainians were targeting and trying to destroy the military bases and facilities, military facilities and infrastructure in Crimea. And as a result of that attack, some Russian military bases were damaged and destroyed. We have some proofs and we have geolocations. According to pro-Ukrainian sources, this territory, this base in Crimea was damaged by the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians are saying that there is a special base, and we have a video of a fire in this area and how people were filming the territory, the results of Ukraine ATACMS strikes. Later, the Russians managed to discover most likely the positions or the warehouses with ATACMS, and as a result of counter-strike, the Russians destroyed a very big warehouse inside of Odessa. The Ukrainians still haven't managed to set the fire to normalize the situation, and there was a very heavy explosion, and according to information we have, there are still secondary detonation in this area and secondary explosions. Furthermore, we got a report that before the beginning of that ATACMS missile, the NATO, United States Global Hawk was flying in front of Crimea, conducting reconnaissance formation, collecting additional updates and navigating the Ukrainian-American ATACMS missiles. Also, during the previous night, there was a very, terrible terrorist attack in Russia. 6 terrorists attacked the synagogue and 2 synagogues and 1 church in the Dagestan region, and as a result of that attack, there were casualties among civilians, but by the morning of 24th of June, the terrorist attack was prevented and the terrorists were destroyed. As you can see, the terrorist attack was done almost in the same time with the ATACMS missiles on the shore of Crimea, where we see which we saw yesterday with the casualties among civilians, and ATACMS missile in Crimea that took place during the previous night. And also at the same time when the Russians start using FAB-3000 massively along the, borderlands in Kharkiv area. So we can make a conclusion that something big is going to happen very, very soon. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds you, we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes to my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.